Let's challenge our limitations and promote our curiosity on education and so much more. This is the No Box Podcast with Dr. T.
Hey, is this thing on?
As you know, No Box Podcast, we're focused on the future of education, pushing the limits and really challenging leaders and faculty and individuals working within the environment of education to really move beyond thinking outside of the box and just eliminating it. And today, we'll continue the conversation with a really exciting guest, Tom Bordenkircher, who is one of our relationship liaisons at the Higher Learning Commission. Tom also served as a faculty member, particularly focused on competency-based education. And if anyone's been paying attention to this podcast, I'm a huge fan of competency-based education and pushing that as truly an opportunity for institutions to reevaluate and refocus their access model, the agility within that access model, and really continuing to try to encourage, whether you're a faculty leader, a faculty member, a president, a vice president, to really begin thinking differently about what it means to have access to your institution. So today I want to welcome Tom. And Tom, great to have you on. It's I know this has been a little bit of a long time coming, so truly appreciate you spending some time with us today.
It's my pleasure. Of course, Ken, it's great to get to know you, all the great work you're doing there. But obviously, we're talking about a topic that I have a lot of passion about, feel very strongly about, have a great history with, and I look forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, well, hey, let's jump into the conversation. So, obviously you work within the accreditation sort of environment, but you've served as a faculty member. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, as your role as a former faculty member, particularly in competency-based education. Should institutions be leaning in this a little bit more than perhaps we're seeing out there in the environment? And, as a former faculty member, what might be some of that advice or perspective you can provide those institutions or those faculty who might be leaning away from it rather than toward it? So I'm just curious as to your perspective, your experience with it, and how we should be looking at this as a environment of education.
I'd be happy to. So just to clarify, my role at the Higher Learning Commission is a Vice President of Accreditation Relations. And institutions in the HLC region have their own liaisons. So each one has people that they work with directly. And every one of us who's a vice president understands what this is. In my role in particular is that the president of the Higher Learning Commission has asked that I serve as the liaison on the substantive change portion of our work at HLC. So I'm part of a team that actually, examines the sub-change process, and competency-based education falls in sub-change. So in some cases where institutions have not done competency-based, they would have to go through an approval process. So I'm quite familiar with both sides of this. I think what was interesting about coming on today is talking a little bit about my own personal, like you were saying, Ken, my own personal experience, because not only do I have that role at HLC, right, and I can speak to that as we go on, but really what I wanted to talk about, and I think you and I talked at length about this, is that both of us are very passionate about this, and me in particular, because this is how I got my start in higher education. Yeah. So, I started at Antioch University, and that was my first full-time job as a professor. But prior to that, I had worked at several other colleges teaching adjunct, and it was very traditional. It was what I was used to. It's how I went through school at the University of Pittsburgh. And I got my doctorate there, and it followed very similar paths that most of us are aware of. There was really nothing different about that education. It was high quality, it was great, but it certainly wasn't competency-based. And then I walked right into an institution that I respected a great deal. It has a great history in Ohio. and I was just fascinated by how they taught. and not having any bad or previous habits to get out of.
Right.
I walked in as a young guy, new professor, just really interested in how to teach and be a full-time faculty member at a place that truly did it differently.
Yeah, as a faculty member, having dabbled in that a bit myself earlier on in my career, the ability for a faculty member, let alone a leader, to see change as something positive rather than something cumbersome seems to still be an issue, and I think as we think about this environment of education and, what we hear swirling around, right, in the media, whether that's, hey, college A closed or college B's cutting 40 million or college C is probably going to be doing something that's going to affect, 100 jobs. I mean, is it an unreasonable statement that one of the issues within these institutions, and I'd say it's not so much about pointing fingers at what was or what wasn't happening at these institutions, but it's some way along that continuum or along that journey, I always feel there's opportunities to pivot, to change, to try things new. And I think what's happened is institutions have got in their own way of saying, well, that's too much work, or I don't really know what this looks like or what it means. And that means we have to go to the Higher Learning Commission or to our respective accreditation body and seek approval, or we have to fill out forms. And so maybe we'll just hold where we're at. Fast forward 15 years, oh, darn, we have to cut 40 million. What is it within the environment that you have seen or perhaps you feel we can point to that has really been the vulnerability that we've been unable to embrace as educational leaders, and even I would go as far as faculty? And I'm just curious as to your perspective, more from a faculty member, because you saw it from that point of view, in the classroom, outside the classroom. Boy, I wish that my leaders would be pushing more or pushing less. I mean, just interested in your thoughts on what's happening in the environment and why we aren't pushing harder, so to speak.
Yeah. So, I mean, we at HLC have one thing in common with all of our institutions, because if you're a member of our organization, we believe in quality education for our students, right? So it's really about the students.
Yes.
So maybe one way to address your question here is to focus on the fact that anyone who starts their career, or anyone, and I would say most people that are in this career, and that, can, but if you are teaching, if you have devoted your life to want to do this, right?
Yes.
Then you care about students. You care about whether or not they learn. And there are different ways to get there. And one of the things that I think is really critical here is, yes, today I'm talking about CBE, but there are a variety of different modalities we can use. We don't have to stay with one. And certainly as an accreditor, we don't tell institutions, oh, you need to be doing this because it's innovative. We are out there. We are a partner. And I think that's what a lot of our institutions like about HLC. It's certainly what I like about working there. And it's like today, right? Where you and I talk about competency-based a lot, and I happen to have some personal background in it. So when I look at it as a faculty member, and to get to your question, I focus on the student, because as a faculty member at the time, it was just a different way for the students that I had to learn the material. And I was so impressed with what we could do in that situation, right? So it may not be for everybody. And when you do a competency-based education program, you have to be honest with students. This is how it's going to be. And some students may not want to do that, right?
Yeah.
But for the ones who do, and the ones that came to us, it was the most exciting part of my career, being able to have that one-on-one relationship with students in a way that I really didn't have in other ways, right? And I think that what makes this really exciting, and you're talking about innovation, if there's one thing we all agree on, is that we want students to want to go to college. We want students to be successful. And we don't want students today to look at college as though they can't get there, they're not able to, it's too difficult, I don't know if it's going to offer me anything. College is so much better today than it was when I went to college. Don't you agree?
I do. I agree.
There are just so many things out there. And I really think it's a great, great time to be in higher education. I really do.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. Actually, it's one of those perhaps, sort of controversial statements, right? That this is the most exciting time to be in education, and people are like, "Are you kidding me? It's so difficult. It's we're still working on a model that's 100 years old." And so I think there's this old saying I used to say when I taught is, "I'm not here to teach you a darn thing." And sometimes students would scratch their heads, and I'd say, "But I am here to create an environment where you can engage and learn." And I think that is fundamentally the way I've always looked at like an accreditation body, is that you're not here to tell us what to do or how to do it. You're here to guide and partner with us to do it the right way, or to give us the advice, sort of what you've done a little bit with Lewis and Clark, where I've obviously we've picked each other's brains a little bit. Hey, what do you think about this? You've been invited to talk with faculty who might have been on that edge of saying, is this something I'm just curious about, or is this something that I want to jump in? Because I know if I jump in, then I'm jumping into an environment that's going to allow me to thrive and allow me to perhaps mess up a little bit, but ultimately come out on the other side, perhaps a better faculty member, and ultimately creating a better environment for my students. So I find that fascinating, that even within that context, you may still have institutions, and to be frank, I think there are way too many institutions that are still sort of on that sideline, perhaps not realizing that, wait a minute, I can call a guy like Tom, get advice, be directed toward a pool of resources, and then leverage that to help drive perhaps some new innovation or change at my institution. So sort of a plug for HLC. So those of you out there listening, you're thinking, gosh, should I really do this? The resources available, and even what's happening across the country more so. Had a great conversation earlier this week with the Tennessee Regents, and they have a really unique CBE model at the Regents level. It's sort of a consortium of curriculum, and institutions sort of deposit that curriculum, and it's shared. And I think that's amazing. It creates not only there's sort of an economic value to that, but the equalization of access in that model is truly, in my opinion, powerful. So essentially, you're creating a environment where everybody is sharing and engaging and finding ways to keep improving that model. And thinking about that, why do you think that CBE particularly hasn't gained, let alone gained more traction across the country? But let's talk about the state of Illinois. Let's talk about why there hasn't been traction, beyond putting a plug in for the Lewis and Clarks, the Parkland colleges. Shawnee is doing some good work. We've got John A. Logan. We've got a few other schools across the state that are beginning to really push the limits on this. At the same time, you have, and I think I may have said this in another episode, you've got some institutions whose presidents will say, hey, Ken, if I even had 10% of the conversation you're having, my faculty would throw up their arms and there would be all sorts of controversy. And we sort of dig into that, and is that why there isn't traction, that there's too much uncertainty? The culture of an institution isn't ready for this sort of change. Because to your point, we do this as faculty, we do this as leaders because it's about providing opportunities to enhance the learning experience of our students. So why wouldn't everybody say, well, if this is going to help my student, why wouldn't I do it? I'm not abandoning the traditional way that Ken and Tom have always taught their class, but now I'm creating another on-ramp into my program that lends a little bit more flexibility for that group of students that might need it. So again, traction. Why isn't it there in a state like Illinois from what you're seeing in the environment?
So let me take a different tactic on this, Ken. So let's go back to what you said. Why don't people call Tom? First of all, like I said before, HLC assigns liaisons to every school, right? The good part about HLC, also from an inside standpoint, right, is I have these incredible peers. We meet once a week. We talk amongst each other. I am not your liaison, actually. It's
Nope.
Anthea who's
Yep,
your liaison.
Anthea.
But, I check in with her. But when it comes to moving, like you say, why can't we get traction? HLC is not out there to tell you what to do.
Right.
But one of the things and what I hope to gain from this is getting the word out there. And I hope, you and I talked about that. It's through these mechanisms that we tell people, listen, you have a liaison. And there's a guy named Tom who's in subchange who you asked me to do a training for, right? So I did a training at your place. I've done a training at Harper. I've done trainings a lot of different places. And I think that, so rather than why isn't it, let's look at it more of a positive way of, gee, I think we can.
There you go.
Right?
Yes.
Because there's really, and I don't know if you agree with me because you're a president and you'll have to tell me.
We don't agree with anyone, by the way.
Well, yeah,
presidents.
But I think, one of the things that we offer, like if you go to our website, right, there's tons and tons of stuff there. And I know, anyone can look at it. It's open to everybody, right? It's all there. And I have a lot of people who tell me, come in and do the trainings. Come in and tell us what it is. And in 9 times out of 10, like that same president who you say, I can't talk to my faculty 10%. That may be true because you're the boss. But when you bring HLC in, I don't know these people. They see me and I introduce myself as a former faculty member. I can talk about not only the regulations about competency-based education, but I can talk about it personally. I can say, I know what it is. I've taught in that. And if that is, we're not saying you have to, but if that's something you want to do, we can certainly help you move it forward.
Yeah. So in terms of, you sort of answered this already, but in terms of leveraging like an HLC or a respective accreditation body, because I trust that, those listening perhaps to this podcast, HLC is not their accreditation body. So, are there things that the HLCs of the world can do to, because I know we can't, say, well, HLC, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. But how do we situate a higher learning commission in such a way where there is access to this sort of pool of resources? Because I think, as we may have talked about even outside of this conversation today, is there might not even be, it might be one of those things where I don't know what I don't know about making this change. And I was talking to a president yesterday who basically said to me, listen, part of their problem and part of her sort of challenge is it's taking longer to build trust within her culture to where a faculty member will say, okay, I'm jumping in. and that's not because she's not a great president or she's not trying. It's just there's so many dynamics at an institution sometimes that limit their ability to move something like a CBE or, as you referenced, other types of innovation forward. So in those situations, hey, let me call HLC and see what advice they can give me. What would that conversation sound like if, hey, Ken's like, hey, Tom, we haven't met, but I heard you're an advocate of CBE and you're helping some other schools. Like what do I need to do here? Like how can you all help me move my institution forward? Because I want to be relevant. I don't want to have to fire 100 people. I don't want to lose non-traditional students because they want more flexibility. But, some of my faculty members, well, they understand that. They're like, it's too difficult to do that. And I'm okay with where I'm at. Help me, Tom, please. What do you got?
Right. So I think, and it depends on the type of president you are, and it depends on your comfort level, right? If I was a president, I would take advantage of the fact that you have a direct contact at HLC in this role of which I play along with my colleagues, which is this liaison. That would be step number one.
Okay.
These are the conversations, believe it or not, we love this stuff, right? Yeah. we would not be in this job if we didn't think we were making a difference, right? Yeah. And in order to get into this job, you have to have a portfolio and a resume of which you've done this work, that you've been out there, not necessarily with CBE, but certainly a faculty member, and you've paid your dues in the academic environment. Right. So when we get that call, right, typically the first thing I do is say, what are you thinking big picture? Are we thinking starting small? Because you and I talked about that. You already have a competency-based program, so you're always ahead of the game. But there might be people who don't even have one yet. Where do we start? Who do we contact? There's CBEN. There are other organizations that can also help you.
Yes.
But don't always see HLC as just this regulatory body, the accreditor, which is going to tell you no.
Right.
We want you to see HLC as, yes, we will tell you where the rules are and help walk you through that.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. Typically, after we have that conversation with them, I don't leave it to them, because when I talk to somebody who's doing this, the minute you get off the phone, a million distractions happen.
Yes.
Right. So typically what I do is I stay on the phone with them and I say, are you close to a computer? Can you open up your computer? I want you to follow along with me. If it's a Zoom, I do it on the screen. And I take them right to those pieces that I know from this conversation they need to hear right now, right away. Number one, we've never done anything like this. I don't even know what it is. I heard about it from someone else, so on and so forth. There are those like you who we're taking it to a new level. That's not a conversation I'm going to have with you. I'm going to have a very different level on that computer, right? Yeah. So that's where we take it. And then there's a variety of different options for people in leadership, because one of the things that I hear my boss say constantly when she talks to presidents, training.
Yeah.
Getting everybody in the room to hear what it is. And when I work with presidents, and I certainly, I before I do a training, I always check in just to make sure, where is that culture? Where are we? What sensitivity do I have to have when I come in there, so that I'm just not spewing nothing but regulation, and everybody's like, see, I told you, this guy is crazy, and this is too hard, and I just want to walk away. So I hope I got to your question there.
Absolutely.
And
Well, I think it it may have happened early on in one of our conversations where, and this is a good thing, where, I think each leader, each faculty member is going to approach change in a very different way, and a great example, to give my dear colleague Pam Lau a plug over at Parkland. I mean, her approach to CBE, is a little different than mine. I'm more of I'm okay putting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse. She wants the horses running for a while before they even attach the cart. And at the end of it all, though, our models of CBE may look and feel a little differently. But to your point earlier, they are helping students and they are creating another avenue of access in a successful way. And the beautiful thing in that is that those faculty are able to talk, that there is conversation happening around, I really like what you're doing there. I mean, we had this conversation today in our final fall CBE team meeting on campus where, even though we're others talk to us, what are you doing? And then we're reaching out to other institutions in other states like Salt Lake or Wisconsin or Texas or Tennessee. And even though all of us are looking at CBE or doing CBE, if you really peel it back, everybody's model looks a little bit different. And
Yes.
and I remember an early conversation with you where I admittedly, ladies and gentlemen, walked away saying, oh my God, like this guy just scared the heck out of me. But then as I leaned into it, it wasn't so much about scaring. It's about, listen, we love at HLC that you're doing these amazing things. Let us help you do it the right way so that it actually has the impact you're looking for. And I think that's a piece that if I were to give advice out to the people, lean into your accreditation organizations as true partners and listen to them and hear them out and leverage the resources that they have. Because I think, if anything, I would argue that your partnership, and friendship, has helped us move something along in a way that I feel more comfortable with. And I think that's something I would like to share with the audience is, if you have questions and you're a little bit nervous, reach out to your liaison, reach out to that person at your, that is sort of in charge, so to speak, of helping you and say, hey, I need some help. And 100% of the time, you're going to get help. As a matter of fact, if it's Tom, you're going to get a lot more than 100%. And I think, that's a testament to you, but also I think just the model of accreditation that you're here to help and to partner. So I think that those of you out there are a little bit scared, nervous, find resources, but always lean on that accreditation body as a partner to help you move forward.
And I can tell you, Ken, I am just incredibly fortunate. I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I'm an old guy now. It's hard to face. But I am with amazing colleagues.
Yeah.
And so no matter who you call at your institution, if you're a membership HLC institution, no matter who you call, you're going to get more than you ever thought you could get, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I know that I'm really pleased about is, yes, I'm on this podcast with you today, right? Because of my role in SubChange and because I'm really passionate about competency-based ed and I really like it. But we call each other in to help each other. So it isn't unusual for you to see me at the podcast and then, have your liaison say, hey, let's call Tom in and we'll do a training.
Yep.
And we'll go through that. At the conference, we do an annual conference, as you well know.
Yep.
And at the conference, we always reserve time for these conversations and for ensuring that we have, because we train peer reviewers during that time, update peer reviewing. And then also we offer these kinds of conversations and, we offer sessions about all the different types of modalities that are out there, right? Because I don't think you and I are ever going to live long enough to see all the possibilities that are out there that we don't even know about.
I agree. So as we try to encourage our peers out there listening and colleagues and friends who are saying, maybe I should reconsider this, you have a broad experience. I mean, you just referred to yourself as a real old guy, or an old guy, not real old. So
I'm kind of really old.
You are mature in your wisdom and perspective, correct? Okay.
I like that.
So
I'll take it.
So you leave, we leave this podcast and you leave, some bits of wisdom from Tom. Let's hear two sets of bits of wisdom. The first set is, 2 or 3 that, there are new leaders coming into a role. There's new faculty members coming into a role. What wisdom are you going to give them as they begin, and we referred to this earlier, their journey in one of the most exciting times in higher education. And then after that, it's for folks like me, right? We've been in this work for a while, you met Mike quickly before the podcast. Mike Lemons is one of our senior faculty doing amazing work. Pushing the limits, even when one could argue he's at sort of that, hey, I can go, 5 more years or 4 more years, but he's still pushing as hard as he was the first couple of years he was here. What advice do you have for the Mikes and the Kens who are kind of, in the career, they're feeling good about what's happening? How do we stay encouraged? And what wisdom do you have for us? And then what wisdom do you have for that new faculty member we just hired in August who's excited and fired up, but sort of wandering aimlessly? So let's close it out with a couple of bits of wisdom from Tom.
Okay, so let's start with the new faculty member, but it also is good for the old guys too, right? So what we know about students, right, is the unfortunate part about students is that they're people, and people have people problems. They don't always have a life in which nothing is going to happen to them that's going to interfere in their life and we get pregnant, we get married. There are life-changing events. And when I was teaching adults, we had this on a regular basis. My kid is sick. Right. My mother is ill, blah, blah, blah. When students come, whether it's community colleges today or any place, there are a variety of people with a variety of needs. And if there's one thing that young faculty really want to do, and they have the energy for it, but what they have to also understand is that it's a complicated world with complicated people, and everybody has their own stuff, right? And the nice part that I liked about competency-based education is it really gave the student an ability to manage their time. They could manage their time, and they understood that it's not this endless paper and this test that's going to come at the end that I'm going to have to be ready for by a certain time. Right. I can manage my life better with less stress. And me as a faculty member has to realize that if that is what you want to do to help that student, right, then you have to make a different kind of time. You have to make a different kind of time for those students. So for young faculty members today and just starting, the first thing I would say is do not get depressed by news, by all the stuff you hear, and especially by old guys who are really, really miserable in their last 5 years of work, right? This truly is, and what I've learned in this field is that every year I've been in this has been the best year ever.
Yeah, I love it. Yep.
And now every time I go into work, I hear something different. I read something different. I have a different perspective on things. And what I say to young faculty members today is read, take it in, experience it yourself, and where you want to go, whether it's CBE or something else, but CBE in particular for me really rang true as a faculty member. I could spend that extra time with those students who really needed more of my attention. Nice. And I couldn't always do that when I was in a traditional classroom. I would have to make additional time outside of class. Right. And for adult students, it's everything they can do just to get there on that day, right?
Exactly.
But today, look at what young faculty members have. They have Zoom. They have emails that actually work. Back in the day I taught, some of those emails got lost forever. So I think it's just such a different world today, and I'm really positive about it. As for the people at the end of their career, I think what's a lot of fun about being in this field, and I don't know if you agree with me, Ken, but it goes back to what I said before. We chose this field, but we'll never learn it. We will never know how to educate every student to their capacity because it is complicated, right? And we're constantly finding new ways to reach students. The other problem, and I think you'll agree with me, is that even if we found a way, then we have all these other things that are happening around us, right? That we have no control over. We have pandemics.
Right.
We have who knows what's coming, right? And if you're an older faculty member and you haven't really delved into CBE or other modalities, it's never too late.
Yeah.
And remember how you felt when you first started in this career, because you can always get that back.
I agree.
It's an exciting time.
I totally agree. Wow, that was really good. I think it's something I've often said to just colleagues in general. But I remember the faculty member when I was a few colleges ago, and there was a little bit of tension in a change that was happening, and I said, well, if this proposal came to you when you interviewed for this job, because you had a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, and you would have reacted a certain way to it. And she's like, absolutely. And so now that you've been here 3 years, why has your reaction changed? And I think to your point, there's a lot of things in the environment that happen that ultimately inform or influence somebody's attitude or readiness for change. But my argument on that is when you come into a role or an institution, you're hired probably in some part because people feel you're committed and you're excited, and we have to find ways, I think, as leaders, and that goes across any level of staff, whether you're a faculty member, a president of a college, a vice president, it doesn't matter, a senior recruiter, whoever, that find ways to maintain that enthusiasm and commitment. Don't look at the barriers, the pandemics of the world, right, as, that really didn't help us, or maybe it did. So how do you sort of carry that forward and carry that enthusiasm? Because I think more and more we're going to find with the advent of technology continue to sort of swirl around us, artificial intelligence, which we didn't even touch, but those are factors that could either inform a level of enthusiasm going backwards or inform that level of enthusiasm going sort of at a higher level. So I think as an audience, as a faculty member, at any level of an organization, make sure you stay tuned into the reason you got into this work. And I think it circles back to something Tom said earlier on is we're in this work because, sometimes the work chooses us, but it's all about the student. And remember that no matter where we are in our career, whether we're feeling great on a Monday and crappy by Friday, there's another Monday a couple days away. And we have an opportunity to keep pushing innovation, to keep pushing our own limits. And as I've said many, many, many times is, this idea that betterment in our work is a perpetual labor, and leverage those resources like the TOMs of the world, the higher, the accreditation bodies, whatever you're a member of. Leverage the friends, the colleagues, the resources out there to keep pushing education to the limits that I think it deserves to be pushed to. So, Tom, this has been awesome, my friend. Appreciate you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the great work you're doing within Illinois and across the country. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode, and make sure to tune in for future episodes. And again, want to thank Tom for his leadership in not only competency-based education, but his leadership at the Higher Learning Commission and his leadership in general across the country. Thank you, my friend, and we look forward to talking again soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken.
All right.
You take care.
Bye-bye.